Okay, cool. Let's start rolling. So, welcome to our what is it, like our third webinar. And we're going to be looking at market data and deriving meaningful metrics from that. Really excited to have you guys here. And I had a lot of fun putting this together. Okay, so I'm Taylor. I am a developer advocate at Amberdata. So I help to get developers up and rolling with our API, how to use it, how to integrate it, and also maintain documentation, things like that. Okay, so we're going to talk about what Amberdata is, just in case you don't know. After which, we're going to quickly go over our API, what it kind of covers, and then we're going to go into Web3 Data.js, which is a JavaScript SDK that I developed. I'm going to be showing you what it looks like to set that up and start using it. After which, we're going to quickly demo the Market Explorer, a quick overview, and then after that, we're going to do a deep dive into the different market data endpoints that we have and how they come together to build what you see as the Market Explorer. So we're going to kind of switch back and forth and see what pieces it takes to build something like this and give you ideas on what you can build using our API. So what's Amberdata? We are a comprehensive blockchain and market data API. We do blockchain analytics, metrics, and security. And then we do lots of market data as well. And we like to take those two things. Something that we haven't seen before is the wedding of market data and blockchain data together. So a lot of our endpoints have the ability to actually return pricing data associated with blockchain data itself, which is a very powerful tool that you'll be able to see how that works out later. And as well, we have dashboards and panels on our website, and you can kind of see that here. It's kind of an example. It shows off the data that we've been collecting, and you can kind of get an overview of what we are supporting, and as well as security audits on smart contracts to keep the space more transparent and secure. Okay, so our API has over 100 endpoints, and it's growing every day. We have both real-time and historical time series, blockchain and market data. So real-time data would come in the form of WebSockets, and then we have our historical time series data, which is great for researching, back testing, trading, etc. And then we also have JSON RPC compliant methods, which makes it easy if you want to integrate with an existing system that's already using JSON RPC calls as you were talking to Geth or something. So here's the documentation. We're going to be going back and forth here a lot, so I'm going to make this part brief, but this is our docs. In here, you're going to be able to test out any of our endpoints after you get your API key. You can just throw it into right here, one of the auth header. And if you throw your API key in right there, then you can try out any of our endpoints right in our documentation. So it makes it really easy to kind of see what you're going to be getting back from that. Okay, so super quick, we have our onboarding page here, which gives you all the tools that you need to get started with creating an account. And after which you can go and you can set up your free developer key. It takes like probably a minute or less. And then after that, you can take that key. And again, like I said, you could throw it in the docs and start toying around with things or any of our examples that we have in our public repo. Okay, so again, briefly, Web3 Data.js is just an open source JavaScript SDK that makes it easy for developers to start building on top of Amberdata's API. So while we have our REST endpoints and they're great, it's really easy to use Web3 Data as a node package. You can just install it and then start building your dApp. You can start doing your research or whatever use case that you have for that. It's intuitive, it's simple. It kind of hides some extra logic underneath the hood, which makes it smart, which we'll see in a little bit. It kind of knows what kind of data you want to come back, and it will automatically get historical, for instance. And it also can enable, and then with all this, it enables you to kind of free up your time to focus on the core logic and not have to focus on, a bunch of Axios calls and stuff like that. Okay, so it's pretty simple, really standard setup. So, npm install, and then you import it. And then upon instantiation, you supply your API key. And once you do that, it's going to be automatically set up to start making requests. And then, for instance, you can go ahead and start calling methods. In this case, it would be a get balance method. Underneath, it will apply all the correct headers that you need in order to make your requests. If you want, there's also the option right here. We can add a blockchain ID if you wanted to switch which blockchain you're making your calls to. It defaults to the Ethereum mainnet, although you can also do Ring B. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to, I have the Market Explorer running on the local host right now. I'm going to do a PR later to update some of the changes I've done, but let's go kind of show you what that looks like right now. So, well, back up. So briefly, the Market Explorer was created during our, we had an internal hackathon every once in a while. And this is one of the projects our CTO, Jonas, came up with. And it's really cool because it showcases our data and what you can do with it. And it's like an amazing example of what it's possible to build using our data, and how you can weave different endpoints together in the data that they return to create like complex metrics. Okay, so here's what it looks like, and we're going to go through each one of these individually and explain like how, like where that data is coming from our API, and then how to use it with Web3.js. But this is kind of what it looks like right now. Just this is the Market Explorer. Okay, so here's a list of all the things that we're going to use to build this Market Explorer, everything that you just saw. So we're going to go through them one by one. So the first thing that we see here is we have exchanges and pairs. Exchanges shows us a list of the supported exchanges that we have. So we actually have an endpoint that will return a list of supported exchanges, as well as the pairs that we support, that each exchange supports. And then for each pair, they have a list of metrics that the pair has. And so as you can see here, like for instance, OKX, we have 407 pairs. And then specifically with this pair, we have ticker data, and we can actually expand these to see the different types of data that we get for each pair. And if we come back, all right, yeah, back here. Here, we'll be able to see where this comes from using our API. So let's go to market exchanges. Okay, so this is where we can get the list that we just saw. So we have our market/exchanges endpoint. And then if we call this with no parameters, we're going to get a list of every single supported pair, and then the data that that pair supports. So it comes back in this format. And then we're able to kind of create a nicely formatted display right here. After that, we can kind of look at by pair. So the data is the same, it's just the index is different. So whereas before we're looking at here's the exchange, and then here's the pairs that exchange has, and the data that those pairs possess. In this case, it's here's a list of pairs, and then what exchange that it supports. So if we come back to our documentation, we can actually see that right here. So again, exactly the same, except that we're indexing by our pair. So we can use this to search for a specific pair and see, hey, what exchanges do you support for this pair? And then for that pair, like what data is there? And then finally, if we come over to this tab, we have this like massively awesome graph that's going to load for us. And this shows us basically the time frame of when when the exchange was listing this token pair. So for instance, XZC, BTC, just some random pair here. You can see the start and end date. And some of these like gaps that you see here is when an exchange has delisted a trading pair. And again, this particular time graph that we see here comes from the data that returns in our API, and it will tell you the earliest date that you have ticker data for, and then the latest date. And so if we put that all together, then we get this massive graph, which kind of shows us the time range of data that we have for a specific pair. So in this case, we're looking at Binance. We can also change this around as well. And then we're looking specifically at trade data. Yes. Okay. So let's see. Let's look at the next part, which is our OHLCV. This is going to be like your typical like candlestick open, high, low, close volume chart. I'm actually going to switch it to something more interesting, BTC USD, because we all know that that has been, oh, Binance doesn't have that. There's been a lot of action with BTC USD recently. Right there. There we go. Okay. Sweet. Okay, so here's just a basic candlestick chart that you can build, and then this is coming from our orders endpoint, which I'll show you right here. Okay, so as you can see right here, given a pair, in this case ETH/USD, we want to get a list of order book data for that specified pair, and it comes back in this format. So we have a data object, and it has our asks and our bids. And the ask has a price, a volume, and number of orders in that. And the way it comes back is that you have a metadata, which contains the columns, and then the data piece is going to contain the actual data that we have. And it comes back in an array format to make it easily used, whether it be in Web3 Data.js or in a Python Jupyter notebook or anything like that. The way that it comes back as an array, it makes it really, really easy to create tables and graphs using that data. And that's what we've done here using that endpoint. And as you can see, like this massive drop that we in BTC USD on September 23rd. And we can also switch between the granularity. So we're doing daily right now, but we can come all the way down to minute granularity and regenerate that graph as well. So that is really cool. And this is coming from our GDAX exchange. So over here, we can actually switch the different exchanges that we're looking at. And then again, like I showed you earlier, we can change the different pairs right there. And so let's go look at what that would look like using Web3 Data.js. So here's a run kit example that I built. It's kind of to kind of showcase what each piece would look like. So we saw this earlier where we're instantiating our Web3 data class and then getting our object right here. So when we were looking at the supported pairs, exchanges, and tickers, in Web3 Data.js, we have a method called getFeatures. And what that does is essentially you can ask it for which features that you're looking to see what we support, and it will give you that back in a namespaced pattern. So for instance, if we just wanted to see what pairs were supported and we wanted to filter by the GDAX exchange, I'll go back and show you where that was at here. Market pairs. So let's say we wanted to get the list of supported exchange pairs specifically for GDAX using the exchange filter. We can actually filter by exchange. So now it will only return all our pairs pertaining to GDAX. And then, as I was saying earlier about Web3 data being quote smart, we can pass in either an array here, or we can pass a single parameter, and it will compile that and bring it back and then return it to you namespaced. So in this case, here is an object that has a list of all of our currently supported exchanges. And then here is the tickers, as you can see here, pertain to this parameter. And this would be all of our ticker data for BTC USD. And so it makes it kind of a lot simpler when, trying to see like what pairs are supported, which is helpful when, if you want to get a list of pairs and then get specific pieces of data on each one, you can just call that endpoint and you can get that data. And then if we come down here, we're looking at the market orders. And This is what it would look like to get the market order book data for ETH USD, just like we saw in the documentation. But this is using Web3 Data.js. We pass in the pair here, and then we're filtering by the exchange, in this case, Bitfinex. As you can see here is that data that came back, and this is kind of this is the live updated data right here. So we have the price, volume, num orders like we saw earlier. Yeah, so that's pretty neat. Okay, and so from here, we're going to look at open, high, low, close, volume, historical, and latest. And let's see, right here. Okay, so perfect. So this is another piece that we need for the candlestick chart. And so same deal, we pass it a pair, and we're able to get back this payload of data. Gives you an exchange, and then the timestamp, the open, high, low, and close in volume for that specific timestamp. And that's part of the piece that we needed to here in order to formulate the candlestick piece of it. Using Web3 data, we can do the exact same thing. So here's two cases where the first one, we want to just get the latest open, high, low, close volume. And if you don't pass in a start date or an end date, it will assume that you want the latest. And if you pass in a start date, it will get the historical. So that logic's kind of like hidden under the hood for you. So it makes it like super simple. So in the first case, we're looking at just the historical data. And then in the second case, we wanted the latest data coming back from that. This trading the trading example here is using the historical endpoint as well as the latest endpoint under the hood. Okay, so another thing we can do here is get this to, let's see, let's come back here. So if we wanted this to update live, we can actually use our WebSocket endpoints, and we can filter by a specific pair and exchange. So in this case, we were looking at GDAX, BTC USD. So we can actually do subscribe to a WebSocket, and we can get real-time order book data for that pair and exchange. And if we were to do that, we could hook it up to this graph and have a real-time candlestick chart. Again, this was built for a hackathon, so they only had like a day and a half to build this, but you could actually plug that in, and we could watch this chart update in real time using our order book data. And another thing that's really cool about combining the two is that we can first get, like, let's say the last week, and then we can start tacking on the real-time data afterwards. So we can combine the WebSockets with the REST API to do that. If you go back to our examples here, so this would be an example of what we'd use to get the order book data, just like you saw in the docs. But this is what it looks like using Web3 data. So we initiate the WebSocket connection, and then we just specify this event name that we're looking for, in this case, market orders. And then we're filtering by a pair and an exchange. And then for every order that comes in, we're going to be able to get that raw order right there. And then I have it terminating on disconnect just for as an example, but you do want to obviously continue to update that. And then here you can place your logic to like update your graph or whatever you wanted to do here. Okay, so we're going to look at this next part, which is this market depth chart. And what this is it's a way to kind of show us the volume of orders. This is the cumulative volume of bids, and then cumulative volume of asks. And it kind of gives us an idea of how the market is looking by kind of seeing those big cliffs of bids or asks. And this one we created using this, I think it's the market depth. Yeah, this is the order, the market orders endpoint right here. Perfect. Yeah, so this is what we'd use. You can use the market orders endpoint to fill in a market depth chart similar to this. So this is just a snapshot that gets refreshed every once in a while. But I actually, let's see if this is going to work. I actually have one this is on a public repo that we built using the WebSocket endpoints. So you can actually create one that is goes in real time as well. Again, using the same market orders WebSocket endpoint that we showed you in the example over here. And so doing that, we can actually have a market depth chart that's updated in real time. Again, this is just a snapshot. But yeah, so you can combine those, so you can get the historical and then combine it with the WebSockets, and then you can start getting updates. So that just updated just then, but this is just a static hitting the rest endpoint. It's not using WebSockets, but you could easily build that in. Okay, so this is pretty cool. This is token transfers, but we're comparing the amount of pending and confirmed token transfers. So how does that work? When there's a pending pool of transactions, and in those pending transactions, we can actually look at the blockchain data. We can grab that transaction, and we can decode the input, and we can see if this is a token transfer or not. So if we go and look at our pending transactions endpoint, so in this case, we were looking at all the pending transactions for this coin right here, more gold coin. And so we'd give it an address. So we would want to look for all the pending transactions of more gold coin. And then we would go in here and we'd be able to decode this input right here, and we could determine if it's a transfer or not. And what this tells us is it kind of tells us, well, okay, so how many, like we can see like the volume of token transfers per se, like of a specific token, but how many of those are actually just sitting in the pending pool? Because that's kind of interesting to know. Is there a correlation between the price and the amount of transactions that are pending and confirmed, or sorry, transfers that are pending and confirmed? So this is a really cool kind of like metric to think about. Where again, we're combining this endpoint, which is the pending transactions endpoint, and then the token, let's see, right down here, token transfers endpoint. So the first one just gives us the token transfers within transactions that have been confirmed. And then the second one, which takes a little more logic, is give me all the pending transactions. Now decode that and tell me which ones of those are token transfers. And so that's something you can like interesting. It's something really interesting to look at, and it'd be kind of cool to see if we could throw a graph of the price over this to see if the price is actually affected by this as well. And then this tab, it just kind of shows a real-time version of the block data coming in using our WebSockets as well. But we're almost out of time, so I'm going to skip over to our arbitrage. So this data right here is static, but it's an example of the data that you can get returned here. And so what we're looking at is each pair is kind of grouped together with the yellow coloring. And then, so they're grouped by pair. And then you're seeing the difference in the last price between different exchanges. So we could use data like this to find arbitrage opportunities. For instance, like if we see, let's come down here actually. So if we see this, we can clearly see that there is a big difference between GDAC's last price and Kraken's last price. And so what you could do is with this basic idea is you could build a real-time chart like this that would automatically kind of show you different arbitrage opportunities. And this would be using our latest and historical tickers endpoint. So we can come here and we can get the latest tickers for a specific pair. So in this case ETH USD. But in order to build this, we have to get the latest and historical ticker for every single pair. And so that's part of the reason that this is a static example of the data return, because I would take a lot of requests. But doing that, if we do that across every pair, across every exchange, then and we did that and even do it in real time, we'd be able to see a picture of on all the different disparages between prices between two different exchanges, which can be really powerful in the cases of doing arbitrage. And I'll quickly show you what that would look like down here using, so this is what it would look like to get a pending transaction with Web3 data.js. And this is what it would look like to get the token transfers from the previous example. But this is what I was more interested in. So this is our ticker data. So again, same thing as before. We have our smart methods here where We can either get the latest if we do not specify start date or end date. In this case, we're getting the historical market tickers. And so that's what you'd use in the background here to build a table like this. Okay, so it looks like we're about time for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand and we can we'll answer them for you. Oh, yes, Gary. I'll let you talk here. Okay, Gary, go ahead and you can ask your question. What do you mean by coin days destroyed? Unless you're talking about burning. Are you talking about burning tokens like in the case of Kyber or Maker? Are you talking about burning tokens or
Taylor, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, so Gary asked if it's possible to calculate coin days destroyed. So I'm wondering if that is if you're talking about burning tokens like with Kyber or
Yeah, so as part of our API, we collect all the events or the logged events, and so if you know the signatures of the burn or mint events for the specific token contract, then yeah, you can get that through the API, and then you can actually plot the circulating supply and the total supply based on those events. So you can see if and when there is burn events, across. I mean, historically. Taylor, remember the hackathon we did at the offsite? That's exactly, I think, what he's asking here.
right? Okay. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that is. I think that's pretty. That'd be pretty easy to calculate. So, I think you could get the address balance and that would tell you the last time the balance is updated. And then from there, you could see, you're asking the number of coins transacted. I'm guessing that means how many coins were transacted in the last transaction that address made. If so, you could do that as well with the address tokens endpoint. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, I think this is definitely possible. Sure, that's fine. Cool. Well, thank you, Gary, for being here and asking great questions. Yeah, just feel free to reach out to us if you want to discuss this further, and we'll be excited to help you with that. Let me quickly show so thanks for listening. Our slides available, I'll post them in a little bit. And then we have our website. You can see our docs, and as well as following us on Medium and Twitter. So thank you guys.